Hi guys, welcome. This is a series of 3 mini e-lectures on advanced presentation skills. It's very odd, isn't it? We do presentations probably throughout our careers, and yet when can you remember ever receiving training on how to do it? Anyhow, the first part of this set of e-lectures will be why many of us feel the way we do about presentations. Generally, human beings find presentations difficult, and it turns out that's to do with the fact that we are human beings. Parts 2 and 3 are more tool-based and insight-based in terms of how you can control the event that you are leading, presumably, or presenting within, and some general pointers about structure and such like. Okay, so that's enough for now, I think. Why we find presentations difficult and ideas around presentation nerves. I will lay out where we're going, like a train journey, if you will. We're going to first look at what presentation nerves actually are. Then we're going to think about what we fear and the physiology of fear. And we're going to close with some thoughts about roles, and particularly roles in presentations, and how this lot ties together. And in part 2 and 3, we'll think about tools. We should stop for a moment because this slide is an example of signposting. It's letting your audience know where you're going to go, and at times through the presentation, actually reminding them of where they are and where they're going to go. This is going to be only 15 minutes, so I'm not going to show this slide again, but were I modeling really good behavior, I would show this slide at 2 or 3 points in the presentation. Okay, so what are presentation nerves? Well, this is, if you will, simply a list from experience, from looking at many presentations, of the types of things we're talking about. From very minor things like maybe a dry mouth to very major things. I've known people who actually fainted in a presentation. But typically, what are the sorts of things many of us experience? Well, maybe a funny stomach, either nausea or maybe diarrhea. Maybe needing to go to the wee quite a lot. Shortness of breath, sweating, blushing. Sometimes headaches. Sometimes not being able to sleep before a presentation. Dry mouth, trembly or wobbly knees, and the list goes on. It's an individual list. Different people have different groups of these symptoms, or maybe none at all. It's not a constant list. Sometimes people get some of the symptoms, sometimes others. And it's not a complete list. You've got panic attacks, you've got a whole bundle of stuff in there. Okay, so a very interesting set of symptoms. They have one thing in common. They are all symptoms of fear. Not academic fear, like that conceptual fear, but fear of imminent danger. Okay, let's proceed. So, all this fear going on, what are we actually talking about? Let's define it. The entire proposal is to give a presentation to 10 people in a room for 30 minutes and answer questions afterwards. Now, just for clarification, the people you're giving the presentation to, the 10 people, the audience, are unarmed. The room has a number of doors with no locks. There are, if need be, police outside you can call. There are no murderers in the room, or tigers in the room, or aliens in the room, or anything like that. Yet, this simple thing, apparently, of giving a presentation generates imminent fear. Now, we probably need to just think about this a bit. It's not just a random person that has these presentation nerves. I won't bore you with the details. There have been a number of quite significant surveys. The one I'm thinking of most is one with somewhere just north of 10,000 participants. It was taken in the United States in the early 2004, I think. That survey was about what people fear, and you may be entirely unsurprised. Things that appeared on that list were buying houses or major financial decisions, divorce, marriage, although maybe if you fear going into marriage, that's an interesting anyway, yes, death, giving presentations. Now, this is the interesting thing. Just over 30% of the people in that survey feared death less than giving a presentation. Now, that's odd and interesting. From the survey, people reported that experience helps, but not consistently, which means things could still go wrong quite easily. But the key thing, if we think about our symptoms, our presentation nerves, is imminent fear of the levels we're talking about is entirely out of proportion to the risk. It's not logical. You're not about to die. So we've established that the symptoms of so-called presentation nerves are actually the same as those as of imminent fear. Now, this gets a bit more interesting. It's entirely sensible and normal, I suppose, to fear things in abstract, like the things we fear. Is it being eaten or mauled or killed or raped or pain or making a fool of ourselves or isolation? It's entirely sensible to fear those things in the abstract sense. But imminent fear is different because it's present. So in most places, if you have imminent fear of things like this, you need help. Now, you either need help from emergency services because somebody's kicking down your door and about to murder you or something, or you need counselling because it's not normal to have imminent fears of things like this in a normal society like our own. And of course, it also causes stress, which is not good for us. Okay, to answer this question about why so many of us have imminent fear to doing a presentation when, on the face of it, the risk is very low, we maybe need to think a bit more about our brains and about the evolution of our brains. So, we can broadly split the brain into three parts. There's the oldest part of the brain, which is the brain stem, and it's here. And this is the so-called reptilian brain, and it's the brain that we all started with. As evolution happened, brains got more complicated, and a second part of the brain tends to be called the limbic brain. And finally, the mammalian, the neocortex, is the majority of the mass of the brain. So let's carry on. And let's actually just think about the functions of these three different parts of the brain. So the reptilian brain, the old part, has 3 or 4 major functions. The first is it controls all of our autonomics. It's the bit of your brain that means you don't have to think, oh, now I need to breathe. It's the automatic systems that run our bodies. It also is where the fight and flight mechanism resides, and we'll talk about it more in a moment. It's very much the home of our instincts, our sixth sense, as it were. The things that protect us. And the reptilian brain is all about protecting us. And finally, it's also the part of the brain which interprets body language. So your reptilian brain, if you will, is like your protector. And everything in it is about protecting you from danger. And that's this oldest part down here. The rest, the mammalian brain, it's where we have our feelings, our emotions. It's where we think. It's where we dream. And crucially for us, the opposite of a dream is a nightmare. It's where we run what I'm going to call video nasties. Well, what happens if it goes wrong? Oh my God. Think how terrible it could be. And what we're going to do now is we're going to look at first the reptilian brain and how this protector can get wrong-footed by the conditions in a presentation. So remember, the body wants to survive, and the reptilian brain, as our guardian, that's its job. It's to keep us alive and effectively prevent us from dying. Now, yes, depending on what you believe or your theoretical concept, it's the DNA that has to survive and propagate itself. But pretty much to propagate your DNA, you, not completely, but you mostly need to be breathing and alive. So, fight and flight is a survival mechanism. And in the case of imminent danger, like, I don't know, an alligator grabbing hold of you or something, fight and flight is housed in the reptilian brain, and it's a mechanism for getting the body ready either to fight, to protect yourself, or to run, flight, to get away. So let's think about what that process does. First of all, okay, you're confronted by something terrible or fearful. Once the reptilian brain recognizes that, which is very quick, it presses, if you like, the big red button. And what that does is, first of all, it pumps adrenaline into your circulatory system. That increases blood flow. So that means it increases oxygen carrying to your muscles and your brain. It increases your capacity to work, fighting, running. That in itself, that increased activity triggers sweating, which is good for 2 reasons. It cools you, which is necessary. And also, with that sweat, you're sending pheromone, hormonal type signals, which are basically saying to whatever's scaring the life out of you, I'm big and terrible and you should run away. Now, if you're about to fight for your life, you don't need food. And the contents of your stomach potentially are going to slow you down if you're running, or make you tireder if you're using energy to fight. So stomach evacuation in either direction. It lightens the body, you don't need the food, and gives you more stamina and endurance. The effect of the adrenaline is to increase your breathing So you oxygenate your blood, and in fact you find that blood is routed through different to feed the main central organs, rather like in shock, but also you get a second stream to oxygenate close to the skin, which is why you blush and go red. Now, remember, the aim of this system is to allow you to survive. So in extreme cases, this system can switch off consciousness. If you're drowning, for instance, actually, one of the things that happens is your fight and flight system will turn off consciousness. It means that you have more chance of surviving if you can be pulled out of the water. Or, for instance, if you're attacked by some creatures like bears. If you lose consciousness, you stop moving. It's, for many predators, some types of predator anyway, they'll lose interest. What else happens? Well, you're all psyched up, your adrenaline's running, you've got oxygen going to your muscles, so you've got trembly knees. The muscles are actually prepared now for anything you throw at them, and they tremble slightly because they're loaded and ready to go. Slow-mo. Now, if any of you have ever been involved in a road accident, and unfortunately from my misspent youth I've had 2 significant motorcycle accidents, I'll tell you what happens. So you're going along and suddenly you realise it's all about to go horribly wrong. Now, the perception is that time slows down. What actually happens is your reptilian brain has recognised danger, and all of the normal processes, the higher order processes that your brain runs, basically get dropped. So that the whole, if you like, processing power of the brain is focused on that one event, and hence time appears to slow down. It's quite odd, really. In my case, I'm on a motorcycle. I can see the car approaching very, very slowly. I can't move fast enough because you're still limited to human reaction times to brake or do anything else. So the accident slowly unfolds with you in it. Very strange. Anyway, for some people, that happens in presentations. And if you survive, apparently some people get a sexual rush or something quite like it. Now, these look quite a lot like the symptoms of so-called presentation nerves. And if you like, what you're seeing is a very natural survival mechanism being triggered by the environment of a presentation. So now we're going to think a little bit about roles, and then we're going to close this part 1 lecture. So the reptilian brain looks after you. It looks for subliminal signs of danger. And separate from this lecture, pretty much trust it, with the exception of presentations. So it's trying to look after you, but sometimes it can be misled by roles that we occupy and people occupy. Human beings are our worst enemies and our best friends. Body language, which pretty much 90% of our communication doesn't come out of our mouth, it's what we communicate, actually receives confirmation that everything's okay, or doubt if it isn't. And obviously in a presentation situation, especially if you don't know what you're doing, that gives you even more doubt, which triggers it. But let's think about roles separately first, then we'll come back to presentation. I don't know, an aircraft or a train. If you're an alien looking in from the outside, what roles would you see? where you see somebody at the front with a steering wheel looking around, and that's one role. There's only one or two of them. Not particularly on Singapore on the MRT, but in most other places on trains or planes. You either see someone walking up and down, giving food out, or wandering along, looking at tickets, a guard or a steward or stewardess type role. And finally, you've got loads of people who just seem to be sitting there and reading or eating or doing stuff, passengers. So, 3 basic roles on an aircraft or a train. And actually, you would be quite concerned if those roles weren't happening, or if the pilot came out and suddenly sat down and started drinking large amounts of alcohol with the passengers. You might be concerned. I would. So roles are important, and they're especially important because effectively your roles are part of the body language, the things that your reptilian brain looks out for. Now, a presentation actually has a number of roles. We'll talk about this in the next e-lecture, but let's just imagine there are 2 roles at the moment: the speaker, if you like, the giver, and the audience, the receiver. So it's a very stilted conversation, and there's an agreement that the receivers, that is the audience, will suppress body language, be quiet and listen, and the speaker will talk and stuff like that. Now remember, your reptilian brain, this very ancient protection mechanism, is looking for certain signs. It's always looking. There's a whole load of stuff which I won't get sidetracked into now, but you might be surprised that you form, when you meet a stranger, you form the basic foundations of whether they're going to be your friend or your enemy, whether they could be your lover or whatever, probably within 3 or 4 minutes. And that's a fascinating story which we won't go any further with at the moment. So your reptilian brain all the while is looking, and there are a couple of major body language signs that it's looking for. It's looking for silence. If you walk into a room and everybody's completely silent, silence is one of the precursors of violence, attack. The other thing is suppressed body language. When you walk into a room, whether they're people you're meeting are friends or not, actually we send welcoming body language so that you actually feel safe to go in there. It feels okay to go in there. But of course, in the presentation, everybody's quiet and body language is suppressed. That's the second danger sign. Suppressed body language and quiet are 2 of the cardinal signs that precede aggression. So, your reptilian brain finds exactly what it's looking for. It's misled by the roles in a presentation, and it presses the red hormonal button. The thing which triggers fight and flight, the thing which gives you the type of symptoms that we call presentation nerves. So, okay, this is the end of part 1 then, if you like, why we are afraid in presentations, or why about a third of us are afraid on average. And the answer is, it's because we're human beings. Now, parts 2 and 3 will give you a tool set to help prevent your reptilian protector triggering the fight-flight system, that is the symptoms, and give you the tools to produce an effective, not a perfect, presentation every time. Don't ever go for perfect, because perfect actually varies from person to person, and whether it's in your academic life or your personal life, you will always fail. You will be disappointed, or you will disappoint somebody else. Perfection is not even measurable. Effectiveness, on the other hand, is measurable. You don't need any special presentation, oratorial gifts. You can achieve an effective presentation every time. It's also a lot less stressful. Okay, so I hope this is useful. See you for part 2 and 3 in a moment. Bye bye.